Psychological determinism denies the existence of any element of freedom or volition in man's consciousness. It holds that every action, desire, and thought of man is determined by forces beyond his control. It holds that, in relation to his actions, decisions, values, and conclusions, man is ultimately and essentially passive. That man is merely a reactor to internal and external pressures. That those pressures determine the course of man's actions and the content of his convictions, just as physical forces determine the course of every particle of dust in the universe. It holds that, in any given situation or moment, only one choice, in quotes, is psychologically possible to man, the inevitable result of all the antecedent determining forces impinging upon him, just as only one action is possible to the speck of dust. Determinism holds that man has no actual power of choice, no actual freedom or self-responsibility. Man, according to this view, has no more actual volition than a stone. He is merely confronted with more complex alternatives and is manipulated by more complex forces. The determinist concept of mind entails a crucial contradiction, specifically an epistemological contradiction. It is, or rather can be shown to be, upon analysis, a self-refuting or self-invalidating theory. And I want now to direct your attention to the nature of this central and insuperable contradiction in the determinist position. A contradiction implicit in any variety of determinism, whether the alleged determining forces be physical, psychological, environmental, or divine. It wouldn't matter whether you hold that man is controlled and determined by the gods, or his genes, or his toilet training, or a socioeconomic environment, or background, or position. This contradiction is common to all of them. Consider the following. The determinist concept of mind maintains that whether a man thinks or not, whether he takes cognizance of the facts of reality or not, whether he holds facts above his feelings or his feelings above facts, all are determined by forces outside his control. In any given moment or situation, his method of mental functioning is the inevitable product of an endless chain of antecedent forces. He has no choice in the matter. That which a man does, declare the advocates of determinism, he had to do. That which he believes, he had to believe. If he focuses his mind, he had to. If he evades the effort of focusing, he had to. If he is guided solely by reason, he had to be. If he is ruled instead by feeling or whim, he had to be. He couldn't help it. No one can help anything. Such is the determinist thesis. But if this were true, no knowledge would be possible to man, as I shall show. No theory could claim greater plausibility than any other, including the theory of psychological determinism. Why? It is most essential to understand this issue. First of all, remember that man is neither omniscient nor infallible. This means, A, that he must work to achieve his knowledge, and B, that the mere presence of an idea inside his mind does not prove that the idea is true. Many ideas may enter a man's mind which are false. But if a man believes what he has to believe, if he is not free to test his beliefs against reality and to validate or reject them, if the actions and content of his mind are determined by factors that may or may not have anything to do with reason, logic, and reality, then he can never know if his conclusions are true or false. Knowledge is the correct identification of the facts of reality. And in order for man to know that the contents of his mind do constitute knowledge, in order for him to know that he has identified the facts of reality correctly, he requires a means of testing his conclusions. The means is the process of reasoning, of testing his conclusions against reality and checking for contradictions. It is thus that he validates his conclusions. But this validation is possible only if his capacity to judge is free. That is, non-conditional, given a normal brain state. But if his capacity to judge is not free, there is no way for a man to discriminate between his beliefs and those of a raving lunatic. But then how do the advocates of determinism acquire their knowledge? What is its validation? Determinists are conspicuously silent on this point. If the advocates of determinism insist that their choice to think and their acceptance of reason is conditional, dependent on factors outside their control, which means that they are not free to test their beliefs against the facts of reality, then they cannot claim to know that their theory is true. They can only report that they feel helpless to believe otherwise. Nor can they claim that their theory is highly probable. They can only acknowledge the inner compulsion that forbids them to doubt that it is highly probable. Some advocates of determinism, evidently sensing this epistemological dilemma, have sought to escape it by asserting that, although they are determined to believe what they believe, the factor determining them is logic. But by what means do they know this? Their beliefs are no more subject to their control than a lunatic's. They and the lunatic are equally the pawn of deterministic forces. Both are incapable of judging their judgments. One of the defining characteristics of psychosis is loss of volitional control over rational judgment. But according to determinism, that is man's normal metaphysical state. There is no escape from determinism's epistemological dilemma. A mind that is not free to test and validate its conclusions, a mind whose judgment is not free, can have no way to tell the logical from the illogical, no way to ascertain that which compels and motivates it, no right to claim knowledge of any kind. Such a mind is disqualified for such appraisals by its very nature. The very concept of logic is possible only to a volitional consciousness. An automatic consciousness could have no need of it and could not conceive of it. The concepts of logic, thought, and knowledge are not applicable to machines. A machine does not reason. It performs the actions its builder sets it to perform, and those actions alone. If it is set to register that 2 plus 2 equals 4, it does so. If it is set to register that 2 plus 2 equals 5, it does so. It has no power to correct the orders and information given it. If self-correctors are built into it, it performs the prescribed acts of self-correction and no others. If the self-correctors are set incorrectly, it cannot correct itself. It cannot make any independent, self-generated contribution to its own performance. If man, who is clearly not set invariably to be right, were merely a super-complex machine engineered by his heredity and operated by his environment, pushed, pulled, shaped, and molded by his genes, his toilet training, his parental upbringing, and his cultural history, then no premise reached by him could claim objectivity or truth, including the premise that man is a machine.